Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this gorgeous edgeless flat herringbone bracelet in a checkerboard pattern using crystal seed beads. It also has a 2-strand magnetic clasp to make it extra easy to get on and off. To give our design an extra pop, we're going to be using Aurora size 11 microcrystals. If you've never seen these before, they're exactly the same size and shape as your size 11 seed beads, but they are in fact crystals. So they're ultra sparkly, really full of bling, and if you want to go check them out, there's a link in the description to have a look. We've got about 80 colors or so you can have a look at. I'm going to be pairing those up with a slightly darker, muted purple rainbow seed bead of the same size. I'm using Preciosa size 10 seed beads, but you can use your Miyuki or Toho size 11s. As long as it's exactly the same size as your microcrystal, the design will work. I'm going to be working with a nice neutral color of Spiderlon beading thread. In terms of length, just use whatever is comfortable. About a meter is probably fine, or a yard, just an amount that's easy to work with. We're going to begin by picking up 4 seed beads, slide them all the way down your thread till there's about 6 inches of tail left at the end, pass back up through all 4 beads once again, and just pull that thread through. You'll see that if you just maneuver them and pull downwards, you can get them to sit nicely side by side in 2 little columns like that there. Once you've got them sitting neatly side by side, we're going to pick up 2 more seed beads. If you have a look closely, you can see our thread is exiting out of the bottom of this side disc here. So we'll loop around and pass through the top of those 2 beads and come back out to where our thread was at the beginning. Pull all the way tight and position the beads neatly beside the ones of the previous column. Now we're going to pass up the 2 beads we just added, pull our thread all the way through and lock them nicely into place. Now we have 3 columns. To make our 4th column, pick up 2 more. We're exiting from this side now, so loop around through both of those beads, pull it tight so they're sitting nicely beside. Then take your needle back down the 2 beads that you just added. We'll do that twice more so that we have a total of 6 columns of beads to create the base of our work. There we are, all finished. So this is going to become the very bottom of our work. So let's flip that over. We'll ignore this tail thread because we'll weave that back down to the bottom later and use it for our clasp. But working with our weaving thread, we're going to start working in what is called herringbone stitch. We're only going to be working in seed beads, so pick up 2 seed beads. We're exiting from this bead on the end, so pass down the one directly beside it. Pull all the way through, position it if you need to, and then without picking up any beads, we'll just pass directly up into the next bead. Take your needle all the way through, and we're in position to add our next herringbone stitch. Pick up 2 more seed beads, pass down the bead below, all the way through, pull tight, position them if you need to, and there they are. From underneath now, go up into the next bead, like so. Pull all the way through, once again, and that will bring us into position to add our 3rd herringbone. Keep your tail thread out the way. Finally, we're going to pick up 2 more seed beads and pass down the very end seed bead. Pull all the way through and position those beads. There we are, that's the first row finished. We're going to do what's called an edgeless turn. So if we just pass back up the bead directly beside and pull very tightly so that it's sitting nicely underneath that row of herringbone that we added. Now, keeping your tension relatively loose, we're going to go from this bead diagonally across and into the edgemost bead once again. And there you go. So we can see the thread is now going from down here across and up there, but because we're keeping this tension relatively loose, it doesn't affect the shape of the beads. Now we're ready to add our next row of herringbone. I like to flip my work over so that I can just always be working in the same direction every time. I find that easier, but hey, if you can work back and forth, no problem. We're going to be working just in seed beads again, so pick up 2 seed beads and go down the bead beside, pull all the way through, position them if you need to, and then go back up the next bead, the one sitting at the top there. And we'll add our next one. Pick up 2 more seed beads, down the next bead, all the way through, position them, and back up that bead beside. Pick up 2 more seed beads, and finally pass down that little bead right at the final edge. Pull all the way through and position them as necessary. Just put your fingers over the top and give it a little tug like that, and that will just help it to sit nicely. Pass back up into the bead beside, give it an extra firm tug to lock the upper row in position, and then just jump across and into that bead on the very end diagonally. All the way through once again, and turn it over. To begin our next row, let's bring in some microcrystals. I'm going to do exactly the same process, so pick up 2 beads, and we're going to pass down the bead beside. Position them as necessary. If we have a look, see how these aren't really joined to each other, these 2 little columns? So this is our first column of herringbone, this is the second one. To join them, let's now pass back up into the bead beside at the top of the next column. As we pull that tight, you'll see a little bridge of thread will now join them, just in here, like that. And if we pull that nice and tight by pulling our thread upwards, we can pick up 2 seed beads. Pass down the bead beside, get them nicely in position, and let's join these 2 herringbones to each other by just passing back up the bead there. Pick up 2 more microcrystals and pass down the bead at the very end. Position them as necessary and then back up the bead beside. Pull all the way through and diagonally across into the very endmost bead. See, we've got a nice clean edge there. So now I'm going to flip my work over, get my tail thread out the way, and I can continue back in the other direction. Pick up 2 more microcrystals, down the crystal beside, position them if necessary so that they're sitting neatly, and up the bead beside. Now for the middle herringbone, we'll pick up 2 more seed beads again, pass down the bead beside, and you know the routine by now, back up the bead beside into the next herringbone. Pick up 2 more of your microcrystals, down the bead beside, position them if you need to, back up the bead previous, diagonally across into the very end bead, and turn your work over. Now we want to create like a checkerboard pattern in our design, so the best way to do that, now that we have this little square here, is to start working with seed beads on top of here. So pick up 2 seed beads, down the crystal, and up the seed bead beside it. Now we'll pick up 2 of our microcrystal beads, down the bead beside, get them in position, up through the top bead of the next herringbone. Pick up 2 more seed beads, and finally down the endmost bead. Get them in position, back up the bead beside, diagonally cross into the bead at the very, very corner. Turn it over. Now we'll do our next row. So this row is the same as the previous one. There we go. Now we can just continue with these 4 rows. See this one where we've got 2 microcrystals, then 2 seed beads, then 2 microcrystals. Same as the row above. And then this one has 2 seed beads, 2 microcrystals, 2 seed beads, 2 seed beads, 2 microcrystals, 2 seed beads. And just repeat that pattern over and over and over and over until you reach your desired bracelet length, in position to create the second set of stitches at the opposite end to finish off our bracelet. So there we are. I'm pretty happy with this size now for my finished bracelet. If we have a look back at the start section, you can see I've started with 4 rows of just my seed bead. So coming up to my end, I'm going to finish off in the same way. So now I'm going to do 2 rows of herringbone using just seed beads. Everything stays the same again. Let's do our edgeless turn. And there's our first row of all seed bead herringbone. We'll do 1 more row. Turn over. And there we go. So to create a smooth transition between herringbone stitch and square stitch, we're going to do 1 more row of herringbone, just very quickly. But this time, we don't need to do our endless turn. We can just go straight back up this bead here. Turn your work over. And picking up 2 seed beads, pass down the bead previous, get them in position, then back across and up both of these beads. Now pick up just 1 seed bead, pass down into the bead following, and back into where we started. Pull tight, and we'll continue down through the bead we added and the one below it, and then back up the one beside. Pick up 1 more seed bead, down the previous bead and the bead below it, back across and up both beads. Pick up 1 more bead, down this bead after, back up these 2, and down both of these beads just here. Finally, we'll go up that end bead, pick up that one last little bead here, go down both of these beads, across and back up the very end and into the bead that we just added. There we go. So now, if we have a look closely, you can see we've got 2 final rows of herringbone, a nice flat square stitch at the end there. Now we're ready to add our clasp. So I'm going to be using a 2-strand magnetic clasp for this. It just slides open like this, and you can see there's 2 little loops on this side and then 2 loops on the opposite side as well. So the strength of the clasp doesn't actually come from the magnet, which sits at the base of this piece here and inside that little tube there. The strength comes from the actual metal on metal contact, because this can't pull out this way. So the only way you can get it off is by sliding it up. Take one side of your clasp and just align it approximately with where you're going to want your clasp to sit. If we look closely, it's going to fit kind of nicely between these 2 bead rows just here and the other side between these 2 just here. See? Looks fairly close to about there. So what I'm going to do is just weave to be exiting from one of the beads that we just pointed out. The easiest way to do that is just go down this bead beside and then back up the one where we intend to start attaching our clasp. I'm going to pick up 2 seed beads and pass through one side of my clasp. Take it all the way through, and then slide those little seed beads down and pass back down both of them. And finally into the end of your work. As you pull that tight, you'll see it's going to just hold that little clasp nicely onto the end there. We'll go up into the bead towards the end of our bracelet, pick up 2 more seed beads, pass through the loop of the clasp again, pull it tight, and then we don't want to go back through the clasp, loop around and back into both of those beads again and down into your work. Pull tight, and that's going to give this little piece just here a nice connection. Now you can go back around this to secure it, which I recommend, but just for a bit of speed, I'm going to pass now along the edge of my work to be exiting from one of these 2 beads here. So if we have a look, if I go down this one, because we have to go up one then down the next, that means I'll be coming out of this bead just here. So now I'll pick up 2 seed beads, down into that loop of the clasp, pull it all the way through, and then once again we go through both of those beads that we just added and the final seed bead of our clasp. We'll do the same thing again, so we're going to go up this bead beside just here. We'll pick up 2 more seed beads, pass through the clasp. I find that if you come through the bottom and towards the top, it makes it easier when you want to go back down because it's already back on the top of the work where you want to start working from. You don't have to try and bring the needle underneath. And there you are. That gives you a really nice tight finish at the end of your clasp. Once again, I recommend going back up and down through both sides of the clasp to get it really secure. Then when you've finished, we're going to just weave down into our work, tying occasional knots between some of these little thread bridges, which if you look closely, you can see there's plenty of little threads that you can tie onto as you weave down into your work. And then eventually, when you're happy with that, you can just cut it off, and then we're going to do the other side of our clasp in the same way. There we go, that side's done. Turn around and we'll start attaching to the tail thread of our bracelet. Now, when we start attaching to our tail thread, we want to make sure we don't accidentally twist the clasp. So be very careful. I find that it's easiest to attach the clasp like this and then start working to make sure that you get it connected without twisting your bracelet. So if we have a look here, my thread is exiting here. I'm going to weave down into this bead and then back up into the one there, and then I can attach that to this loop on this side. So it's very important that you make sure you don't twist it. Thread down into the bead beside and back up the next one to be in position. Pick up your 2 seed beads, slide them down, fold your bracelet over, make sure it's not twisted, and then pass through the corresponding loop. Go back through both of those seed beads, pull it tight, and then back down into the seed bead where this piece is attached. Up the one beside, pick up 2 seed beads. Because we want this piece to be attached to this side of the loop, make sure that you go through here on the same side that you want these little pair of beads to be sitting. So pull through, there we go, from underneath, back in from the top and into the end of your bracelet. Pull all the way through, and that's going to get that secured. Now, we can be sure we're not going to have a mistake now with our clasp coming out, so we can separate the two pieces because it's definitely easier to work that way. I recommend going back around this bit to secure it, and then we're going to just weave across until we're exiting in position to add the other connection. Pick up 2 seed beads, go into the loop from underneath, and then back through those 2 seed beads on top. Pull tight, and then we're going to go up into the bead beside, pull tight, pick up 2 last seed beads, make sure that we stay on this side of these beads as we go up into that little clasp loop, and then back into these 2 beads here and into our bracelet to finish off. There we go. So again, you might want to secure these 2 little ends just here. Then we're going to just weave down into our bracelet, tying occasional knots as we go, and then we'll be all finished. And there you go. You can see the edge is nice and clean. You can't see any thread there. And then just look how sparkly those crystals are. Gorgeous. Close the clasp, and it's ready to wear.